In November 1784, a German periodical posed the question, "What is enlightenment?" Immanuel Kant responded to this question. This question, "What is enlightenment?" has persisted for centuries and has been addressed directly or indirectly by those from Hegel and Nietzsche to Max Weber and Horkheimer. It remains a central concern because it touches upon fundamental aspects of human thought, action, and identity. Kant's approach introduces a new perspective. Prior reflections typically categorize the present as belonging to a distinct era of the world, interpreted signs of forthcoming events, and analyze the present as a transition towards a new world. Kant's response deviates from these approaches, posing a unique challenge within the Christian philosophical tradition. Kant's text on enlightenment presents a unique perspective on the present era. Unlike previous philosophical reflections, he focuses solely on understanding contemporary reality without considering it in relation to past eras or future achievements. He defines enlightenment as an exit from the state of immaturity, where individuals rely on others' authority instead of using their own reason. He illustrates immaturity through examples such as blindly following books, spiritual leaders, or doctors as orders without questioning them. Enlightenment then involves individuals daring to know and using their reason instead of relying on external authority. Kant suggests that enlightenment is both a collective process and a personal act of courage. It requires individuals to participate in the process voluntarily and have the audacity to think for themselves. He also introduces the concept of mankind being involved in the enlightenment process. This raises questions about whether enlightenment affects all humanity politically and socially, or if it pertains to a change in what defines human nature itself. Kant identifies two essential conditions for escaping immaturity: the clear distinction between obedience and reason, and the freedom to reason without restrictions. This involves individuals being able to think independently while fulfilling their societal obligations such as paying taxes or fulfilling religious duties without blindly following orders. Kant introduces a distinction between the private and public uses of reason, which is quite different from the conventional understanding of freedom of conscience. According to him, individuals use reason privately when fulfilling societal roles or responsibilities, such as being a soldier, paying taxes, or serving in a civil capacity. In these situations, reason must be subservient to the specific tasks and goals at hand, and there is no room for free use of reason. However, when individuals reason as rational beings, detached from their societal roles and contribute to the collective rationality of humanity, then reason must be free and public. Enlightenment, therefore, is not just about securing personal freedom of thought, but also about ensuring the universal, free, and public use of reason. This raises the question of how to guarantee the public use of reason, especially when individuals are fulfilling their societal duties. Kant suggests that a political solution is needed, where the exercise of reason in public is encouraged and protected. He implies that a form of rational despotism, where political authority is aligned with universal reason, could ensure both obedience and the free use of reason. Kant's text does not offer a complete description of enlightenment, but it is important because it connects to his other works like the Critiques. In this text, he talks about enlightenment as a time when humanity starts using reason without blindly following authority. This requires critiquing illegitimate uses of reason, which lead to dogmatism and illusion, and defining legitimate use of reason to ensure its autonomy. Kant's reflection on enlightenment also relates to his other writings on history, where he discusses humanity's progress toward maturity. Enlightenment marks humanity's transition to adulthood and individuals' responsibility in this process. This text suggests a connection between critical reflection and historical analysis. It reflects Kant's thoughts on his own work in the context of his time. This leads to a discussion on modernity as an attitude rather than just a historical period. Modernity is about how people relate to contemporary reality, make conscious choices, think, feel, and act. It is a continuous struggle with counter modern attitudes. To illustrate modernity's attitude, Foucault brings in Baudelaire's perspective. Baudelaire sees modernity as a break from tradition with a sense of novelty and impermanence. However, being modern is not just about accepting change, it is about adopting a deliberate attitude towards it. Baudelaire suggests that modernity involves recognizing the eternal within the present moment rather than just being swept away by passing trends. He uses the example of painting to explain this, highlighting how modern painters capture the essence of their time even in its darker aspects like mortality. He emphasizes the importance of the present rather than despising it. Baudelaire's idea of modernity is ironic. It does not treat the present moment as sacred or try to preserve it. It is not about merely observing and collecting experiences like a spectator would. Instead, Baudelaire describes modernity as an active pursuit, contrasting it with the idle observer. Modernity for Baudelaire involves seeking out the essence of the present moment, finding poetry in history, and transforming reality through art. He praises artists like Constantin Guise, who work when others are idle, bringing life and beauty to their surroundings. For Baudelaire, modernity means seeing the world differently, imagining it beyond its surface appearance, and transforming it through artistic expression. It is about respecting reality while also challenging it creatively. Modernity is not just about relating to the present, it is also about how individuals relate to themselves. It involves a form of self discipline and refinement, what Baudelaire calls dandyism. Modern individuals are not just discovering themselves, they are actively shaping their identities. Baudelaire believes that this attitude of modernity and self refinement does not belong in society or politics. Instead, it is confined to the realm of art where individuals can freely express themselves and transform reality. Foucault aims to highlight the profound impact of the Enlightenment era and modernity on philosophical inquiry. Rather than focusing on specific historical events or doctrinal loyalty, Foucault emphasizes the ongoing philosophical approach that questions humanity's relationship with the present historical existence and individual autonomy. One aspect of this approach involves rejecting a rigid adherence to Enlightenment principles. While acknowledging the Enlightenment's significance in shaping political, economic, and cultural structures, Foucault argues against viewing it as a binary choice between acceptance and rejection. Instead, he advocates for a nuanced analysis of our historical context, recognizing both the positive contributions and limitations of Enlightenment rationality. Rather than being constrained by a predetermined essential rationality, our analysis should explore the contemporary boundaries of human autonomy. This involves precise historical investigations focused not on preserving an Enlightenment essence but on understanding what aspects of Enlightenment thought are no longer essential for our self conception as autonomous individuals. We must distinguish between the Enlightenment and humanism as they represent distinct historical phenomena with different implications. The Enlightenment refers to a specific period of European societal development characterized by various transformations in politics, knowledge, and technology. It primarily concerns a critical approach to the present. Humanism, on the other hand, is a recurring theme in European history, encompassing diverse value judgments and perspectives. Throughout history, humanism has taken on different forms, often aligned with religious, scientific, political ideologies. However, it lacks consistency and relies on external frameworks for defining human nature. While humanism has frequently intertwined with Enlightenment ideas, they are not synonymous. The Enlightenment's focus on critical self reflection and autonomy contrasts with the varied and sometimes contradictory nature of humanism. Thus, rather than viewing them as identical, it is more accurate to see them in tension with each other. It is important to avoid conflating these concepts, as historical evidence suggests they have often been distinct and even opposed to each other. Analyzing their complex relationship over the past centuries can contribute to a clearer understanding of our historical consciousness. The philosophical ethos Foucault proposes involves a critical examination of our thoughts, actions, and beliefs through a historical understanding of ourselves. This ethos is characterized by a mindset of pushing boundaries rather than simply rejecting existing norms. Criticism involves analyzing and reflecting on limits, but instead of solely focusing on what knowledge must avoid, the critical question shifts to the understanding the balance between universal norms and individual uniqueness. The goal is to transform critique from mere limitation to potential transgression. This means criticism becomes a historical investigation into how we have formed our identities and recognized ourselves as subjects of our actions, thoughts, and speech. It is not about finding universal structures but understanding discourse as historical events, making it both genealogical and archaeological. This critical attitude should also be experimental. It involves historical inquiry and engages with contemporary reality to identify possible and desirable changes. Rather than pursuing grand global projects, we should focus on specific practical transformations. Foucault values the tangible progress made in areas like social relations and perceptions of illness over abstract visions of a new society. However, a valid objection might raise. By focusing on local inquiries, do we risk being shaped by broader structures beyond our awareness and control? While we may never achieve complete knowledge of our limits, this doesn't mean our efforts are futile. Our work maintains a degree of generality, systematicity, and coherence, even if it is always limited and subject to starting anew. The paradox of the relationship between individual capability and power dynamics is central to understanding societal development. While the Enlightenment hoped for the simultaneous growth of individual capacities and freedoms, the reality is more complex. Various technologies and social institutions, by economic and political motives, have introduced power dynamics that shape how capabilities are acquired and exercised. To study this, we examine practical systems focusing on how people act and the reasoning behind their actions. This involves analyzing the rationality guiding their behaviors, the technological aspect, and the strategic decisions they make within these systems. This analysis provides a homogeneous framework for understanding historical practices. Practical systems stem from three main areas: control over objects, interaction with others, and self regulation. While these areas overlap, they can be analyzed separately to understand how knowledge, power, and ethics shape individual subjectivity. Despite their specificity to particular times and contexts, these analyses have a generality that extends across Western societies. Issues like the relationship between sanity and insanity or the role of sexual relations have persisted over time. However, this generality does not imply a continuous historical narrative, rather, it highlights the unique historical forms of these issues. Studying how these issues are problematized allows us to understand broader questions in their historically specific context. Kant's critical questioning of the present and ourselves remains meaningful. His approach has influenced philosophical thought over the past 2 centuries. This critical ontology is not just a set of doctrines, it is an attitude, a way of life. It involves analyzing our limits and experimenting with surpassing them. This philosophical attitude is expressed through various inquiries. These inquiries are methodologically coherent, combining archaeological and genealogical approaches to study practices as both rational and strategic. Theoretical coherence comes from understanding how our relations with things, others, and ourselves have been historically problematized, and practically it involves testing historico critical reflections against real life practices. The critical task may not require blind faith in Enlightenment ideals, but it does demand diligent work on our limitations driven by a desire for